Negligence is the first standard or law I'd like to introduce you to. You may also have heard of the term malpractice. Negligence is the failure to give proper care. It is unintentionally doing something wrong. A few moments ago we talked about subtle abuse, and negligence is a form of subtle abuse. Not reporting information about a patient to a nurse can be considered negligence. Perhaps a patient slipped or refused to take his liquids or her liquids. Failure to report that information is negligence. It's important for others to know. Leaving wet or soiled clothes, as mentioned prior, can also be considered negligence. And again, keeping in mind that it's according to the standards of reasonable care. Assault is the second standard I'd like to talk about. Assault is the threat to do bodily harm or punish. Shaking your fist might seem like something that you do out of frustration, but shaking your fist or even a glare at a patient can be perceived as assault. If you told the resident that they better cooperate with you or else, this can also be considered assault. In short, if you say or do something that causes a patient to feel that they must comply with you or else, it can be considered assault. Now, in contrast, battery is illegal body contact, the touching of a person without their permission. Now, some people like physical contact and others prefer not to be touched and consider it an invasion of their personal space. When in doubt, ask. A safe bet is to say, "Can I? Do you mind?" So be sure to do that before you hug somebody, before you touch their hand, or touch them in any way. False imprisonment is the unlawful restricting or restraining of a person's freedom of movement. Restraining a wandering resident to a bed or locking a resident in a room are examples of false imprisonment. They are no-nos. Side rails are also commonly used restraints that could be interpreted as false imprisonment if it goes beyond the prevention of falls. So if it goes beyond that, it's your way of keeping them in the bed versus preventing them against something. False imprisonment could then be termed as such. If you are protecting someone from injury or doing something that they don't understand, or protecting them from doing something that they don't understand they're doing, you are most probably not engaging in false imprisonment. However, there is a fine line between using a restraint to protect someone and using it to disallow them their personal freedom. If you're not sure, here's the bottom line. Ask somebody that can assist you. Get advice from a supervisor whenever you are unsure. The goal is to keep them as restraint-free as possible. Invasion of privacy is failing to protect the resident's body or their personal information. It is their right to have that be theirs. Everyone has a right to keep their personal business personal, and you are expected to do what you can to protect somebody's privacy. Now, this means things like not only covering a patient when giving him or her care, but closing a door when you're toileting them, as well as avoiding gossiping with staff when you're having lunch with them. The golden rule is that what you hear or see must remain private between you and the resident. Finally, defamation of character is a legal standard I want to share with you. It's a fancy way of saying you cannot injure or harm the name or reputation of another person. You would do this by false or malicious statements to a third party. There are two types. One type of defamation of character is libel, the other is slander. In short, libel is written, slander is spoken. So keep that in mind, that's the difference. Let me talk about libel and give you some examples, and then I'll take you through slander. Libel is an unfavorable picture or unfavorable written words about another person. Negative comments about a coworker, for example, in the communication logs. And I usually say if you're using an adjective to describe something, you perhaps are going beyond just stating the facts. Could be perceived as libel. It's okay to factually state information like what you have observed in a document like the communications log, but if you're assigning judgment, it's inappropriate and can be construed as libel. In contrast to the written word or libel is slander, which is spoken. Slander in its common form is gossip or venting. It's important that you take the high road and avoid participating in this type of interaction. It's okay to say to someone, I'm not comfortable with you talking about this or so-and-so. By approaching other people in this way, you are refraining from putting the other person on the defense, but you're also sending a clear message that it's not okay, and you're showing what your personal ethics are. Speaking of ethics, let's talk about that. Ethical standards are also known as the code of conduct. Ethical standards involve keeping promises and doing what you should do and acting in accordance to the rules and standards for right conduct or practice. It's doing what you ought to do because it is right and consistent with good and moral conduct. An example I like to talk with healthcare workers about is tipping or gifts. Although your facility most probably has policies and procedures around this, the giving of gifts by a client or by a resident, you should know that you cannot accept them. Ask your supervisor if you're unsure how to handle such a situation. But we are asked at times to follow our personal ethics, and also ethics can be outlined within your facility's policies or procedures. So think about your ethics in your daily work. It is your responsibility to make sure that a resident's rights are maintained and that others are providing care reasonably. It's your ethical responsibility. Now, it can be uncomfortable if you observe, for example, another nursing assistant doing something to bring it forward. But remember why you do what you do. It's for your patients and for your residents. So it's your obligation to consider this as part of your job. Some ground rules to keep in mind, though, when you're bringing something forward. First, be extremely certain of what you witnessed. Second, be prepared to factually and specifically communicate what you observed. So those two things are really important. And then take the situation to someone who can act on it immediately. Often this is your supervisor or it's your nurse in charge during your specific shift. Abuse and the reporting of abuse is key. It's your legal and ethical responsibility to report abuse if you suspect or observe it. Keep in mind that you can be held responsible if you choose not to report it.